I lent my brother $50,000 to save his business. He promised he'd pay me back in 6 months. That was 3 years ago. When I called, he blocked my number. When I showed up at his old apartment, he'd moved without telling me. While I was working double shifts just to keep my lights on, drowning in the debt I took on for him, he was posting pictures from Vegas, buying a Tesla, living in a house that costs more than I'll make in a lifetime. I tried to be patient. I tried to be understanding. I reminded myself that blood is thicker than water. But when I finally tracked him down and knocked on his mansion door with a court order in my hand, the look on his face told me everything I needed to know. He never planned to pay me back. Want to know what happened next? Stay with me. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The courthouse smelled like old paper and broken promises. I sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom 3B, clutching a manila folder thick enough to choke on. Inside were 3 years of text messages, bank statements, voice recordings, and one notarized loan agreement that my brother swore he'd honor. The bailiff called my name. I stood, knees stiff, and walked through those heavy oak doors, knowing that whatever happened next would either validate everything I'd sacrificed or confirm that I was the fool everyone warned me I'd become. Let me rewind. My name is Ryan Robinson, and I used to believe that family meant something. That when someone looked you in the eye, shook your hand, and promised they'd make things right, you could trust them. Especially when that someone shared your blood, your childhood, your last name. But trust, I learned, is a currency some people spend without ever intending to pay back. It started on a Tuesday in late March, 3 years ago. I was managing a small accounting firm in Belmont Heights. Nothing glamorous, but stable. My apartment was modest, my car was paid off, and I had about $70,000 saved up. Not rich, but comfortable. Secure. Then my phone rang. It was my brother, Logan Martinez. His voice cracked the second I answered. He didn't even say hello. Just launched straight into panic mode, telling me his business was going under, that he'd made a mistake with a supplier, that the bank had denied his loan application, that he was going to lose everything. I should have asked more questions. I should have demanded to see the books, to understand exactly what kind of mess he'd gotten himself into, but I didn't. Because when your younger brother is crying on the phone, begging for help, telling you he'll lose his house, his car, his entire future, you don't think like an accountant. You think like a brother. So I said yes. I wired him $50,000 the next morning, cleared out most of my savings. He promised he'd pay me back in 6 months, maybe sooner. He said he just needed to get through this rough patch, that business was about to pick up, that he had clients lined up. He even sent me a formal loan agreement, signed and notarized, interest-free, because we were family. Pay back in full by September. September came and went. When I called, he said he needed another month. Then another. By December, his tone had shifted. Less apologetic, more defensive. He started saying things like, "You know how hard the economy's been?" And, "I thought you said this was family, helping family, not a business transaction." I told him I wasn't trying to pressure him, that I just needed to know when I could expect something, anything. He said he'd have it by the new year. He didn't. January rolled into February, then March again. A full year passed. I called every few weeks. At first, he answered, made excuses, promised vague timelines. Then the excuses got shorter, the timelines vaguer. By the second year, he stopped answering altogether. I started texting instead, long messages at first, trying to be reasonable, trying to remind him that I wasn't some loan shark, that I was his brother, that I'd only asked for help because I believed in him. The texts went from read to unread. Then one morning I woke up and saw it, the little notification that made my stomach drop. Logan Martinez has blocked you. I stared at my phone for a full 10 minutes, refreshing the screen like it was some kind of glitch. It wasn't. My own brother had blocked my number, cut me off completely, like I was some kind of pest, like I hadn't just handed him $50,000 that I'd worked years to save. I tried email, blocked. I tried social media, blocked on everything. Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn. It was like I'd been erased from his life. I thought about showing up at his apartment, the one he'd been renting in Lakewood District. But when I drove there one Saturday morning, the landlord told me he'd moved out 6 months earlier. No forwarding address, no notice. Just gone. I stood there on that cracked sidewalk, staring at the empty windows of his old unit, feeling something inside me harden. Not anger, not yet. Just this cold, creeping realization that I'd been played. But life doesn't stop just because you've been betrayed. I still had bills to pay, rent, groceries, car insurance. And now, without that $50,000 cushion, every expense felt heavier. I picked up freelance work on weekends, tax prep during filing season, bookkeeping for small businesses that paid under the table. I worked 70-hour weeks just to stay afloat, just to rebuild what I'd lost. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on Logan. Not obsessively, but enough. I created a fake profile on Instagram under a generic name, no photo, just so I could see what he was posting. And what I saw made my blood boil. Vegas trips, bottle service at clubs, a brand new Tesla Model S, glossy black, parked in front of some upscale restaurant, designer watches, courtside seats at basketball games. He was living like someone who'd just hit the lottery, not someone who owed his brother $50,000. And the captions were the worst part. Inspirational garbage about hustling, about grinding, about how success comes to those who work hard and stay focused. I wanted to comment. I wanted to call him out publicly. But I didn't. Because deep down, some part of me still wanted to believe there was an explanation. That maybe he'd come around. That maybe he'd surprise me one day with a check and an apology. 2.5 years in, I was still waiting, still hoping, still telling myself that he'd eventually do the right thing. Then I saw the post that broke me. It was a photo of a house, not just any house, a mansion. Wraparound porch, stone facade, 3-car garage, manicured lawn that looked like it belonged in a country club. The caption read, "New chapter, blessed beyond measure. Hard work pays off." The location tag said Hillcrest Estates, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in the state. Homes there started at $1 million, easy. I sat in my cramped apartment, staring at that photo on my cracked phone screen, and something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, final break. Like a rope that had been fraying for years suddenly giving way. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just opened my laptop and searched for a lawyer, not just any lawyer. I needed someone who specialized in contract law. Someone who could take a signed, notarized loan agreement and turn it into a court order. I found a small firm in downtown Belmont Heights. The consultation was free. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Abigail Anderson, looked over my paperwork and nodded slowly. She said I had a case. A strong one. She said it would take time, maybe 6 months, maybe longer. She said there were no guarantees, but that if I was serious, she could help me. I signed the retainer agreement that same day. The legal process was slow, tedious, frustrating. Depositions, filings, motions. Logan didn't respond to the initial summons. The court had to serve him 3 times before he finally acknowledged it. Even then, he didn't hire a lawyer. He represented himself, showed up to one hearing in jeans and a hoodie, and told the judge that the loan was a gift, that I'd never expected it back, that I was just bitter about his success. The judge asked for evidence. Logan had none. No texts, no emails, nothing in writing that supported his claim. I, on the other hand, had everything. The signed agreement. Screenshots of messages where he explicitly promised repayment. Bank records showing the wire transfer. Voice recordings where he acknowledged the debt. The judge ruled in my favor, full amount plus interest, $57,000. The verdict came down on a Thursday afternoon. I walked out of that courtroom, holding a certified court order, my hands shaking, my chest tight. Abigail shook my hand and said, "Now comes the hard part, collecting." I asked her what she meant. She said that winning a judgment and actually getting paid were 2 very different things. She said people dodge, hide assets, delay, appeal. She said I needed to be prepared for a fight. I told her I'd been fighting for 3 years. I wasn't stopping now. That weekend, I did something I'd been avoiding. I drove to Hillcrest Estates. I didn't have the exact address, but I had the photo. I drove through those gated streets, past sprawling homes with fountain yards and circular driveways, until I found it. The house from the post. It looked even bigger in person. I parked across the street, engine idling, staring at that perfect lawn, that three-car garage, those tall windows glowing warm against the evening sky. And I thought about my one-bedroom apartment with the leaky faucet and the neighbors who fought at 2 in the morning. I thought about the extra shifts I'd worked, the freelance gigs, the ramen dinners, the nights I couldn't sleep because I was calculating how long it would take to rebuild my savings. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the house. Then I texted it to Abigail with one line. I found him. She replied within minutes. Good. Let's serve him the order in person. Maximum impact. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Not a happy smile, a sharp one. The kind that comes when you finally stop asking nicely and start demanding what's yours. The plan was simple. Show up, hand him the court order. Make sure he understood that this wasn't going away. Abigail said I didn't have to be there for the actual serving, that a process server could handle it, but I insisted. I needed to see his face. I needed him to see mine. So we scheduled it for the following Tuesday, late afternoon, when most people were home from work. I took the day off, told my boss I had a legal appointment, which wasn't a lie. I met Abigail and the process server, a wiry guy named Joseph Taylor who'd done this kind of thing 1,000 times, outside a coffee shop 2 blocks from Logan's neighborhood. Joseph walked me through the protocol. He'd knock, identify himself, hand over the documents, and confirm receipt. I'd stay back, out of sight initially, until the handoff was complete. Then, if I wanted, I could step forward. Abigail warned me to keep my cool, not to engage in any arguments, not to give Logan ammunition for a harassment claim. I nodded, but inside I was already rehearsing what I'd say. Not yelling, just cold, clear truth. We drove to Hillcrest Estates in separate cars. The gate was open, some landscaping crew had propped it for their trucks, so we rolled right through. The house looked even more impressive in daylight. Tall, stately, with stone columns and oversized windows that probably cost more than my car. We parked on the street. Joseph grabbed his clipboard and the envelope, thick with legal paperwork. I stayed in my car, windows cracked, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Joseph walked up the driveway, climbed the 3 steps to the front door, and knocked. Once, twice, no answer. He knocked again, louder. I saw movement through the window, a shadow shifting. Then the door opened. Logan stood there in athletic shorts and a fitted shirt, barefoot, holding a protein shaker. He looked good, healthy, tanned, hair freshly cut. Not like someone drowning in debt. Not like someone who'd been avoiding his brother for 3 years. He looked annoyed, like Joseph was a door-to-door salesman interrupting his afternoon. Joseph introduced himself, explained he had legal documents, and extended the envelope. Logan's face changed. Confusion first. Then recognition. Then something that looked like panic. He didn't take the envelope right away. He asked what it was about. Joseph said he wasn't authorized to discuss details, only to deliver. Logan hesitated, then snatched the envelope, tore it open right there on the porch. I watched him read, watched his eyes scan the first page, then flip to the second, watched his jaw tighten. Watched him look up at Joseph and say something I couldn't hear from the car. Joseph pointed at his clipboard, asked Logan to sign confirming receipt. Logan scribbled something angry and fast, shoved the clipboard back, and slammed the door. Joseph walked back to his car, gave me a thumbs up. It was done. Officially served. Legally binding. I sat there for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to decide if I felt victorious or just empty. Then I got out of the car. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe I needed closure, maybe I needed him to see me, to know that I wasn't just some faceless name on a legal document. I walked up that pristine driveway, past the Tesla parked in the garage, and knocked on the door myself. Harder than Joseph had. 3 solid knocks that echoed. The door flew open. Logan stood there, face flushed, court order still in his hand. When he saw me, his expression twisted into something I'd never seen before. Not guilt, not shame, rage. He said my name like it was a curse, asked me what the hell I thought I was doing. I stayed calm, told him I thought I was collecting what I was owed. He laughed, bitter and sharp, said I was pathetic, that I'd actually taken him to court over money, that I was supposed to be his brother. I asked him when he'd started acting like one. He said he'd been going through a tough time, that I wouldn't understand, that I'd always had it easier. I stared at him. Told him I'd worked double shifts for 2 years to recover from lending him that money. Told him I ate ramen for dinner while he posted pictures from nightclubs. Told him he didn't get to play the victim. He stepped closer, jabbed a finger toward my chest but didn't touch me. Said the money was a gift, that I'd offered it freely. That he never forced me to give him anything. I pulled out my phone, opened the screenshots I'd saved, the ones where he explicitly called it a loan, where he promised repayment, where he thanked me for helping him get back on his feet. I held the screen up to his face. He looked away, said those were taken out of context. I asked him what context made, "I'll pay you back in 6 months," means something other than a promise. He didn't answer, just said I should leave before he called the cops. I laughed, told him to go ahead, told him the court order in his hand meant the cops would be on my side, told him he had 30 days to pay or I'd start seizing assets. His face went pale. He asked if I was serious. I told him I'd never been more serious in my life. Then I turned and walked back to my car, hands shaking, adrenaline flooding my system. I didn't look back. Didn't give him the satisfaction. I got in, started the engine, and drove away. It wasn't until I was 3 blocks away that I realized I was smiling. Not because I was happy. Because for the first time in 3 years I'd stopped being the one who waited. But let me take you back further. Because this wasn't just about $50,000. This was about a lifetime of patterns I'd ignored. Logan and I grew up in a cramped 2-bedroom house in the older part of town. The kind of neighborhood where people knew each other's business and everyone's lawn needed mowing. Our parents worked hard, Dad in construction, Mom as a receptionist at a dental office, but money was always tight. We shared a bedroom until I was 16. Bunk beds, 1 desk, constant arguments over space and noise, and whose turn it was to take out the trash. I was the older brother by 4 years. That meant I was expected to set the example, to look out for him, to be responsible. Logan was the charming one. The one who could talk his way out of trouble, who made friends easily, who always had some scheme or hustle going. In high school, he sold counterfeit concert tickets and somehow never got caught. In college, he started 3 different businesses, all of which failed within a year, but he always had an explanation, always had someone else to blame. Our parents enabled it. Every time he crashed, they cushioned the fall, paid his rent when he came up short, covered his car payment when he spent his paycheck on something else. And every time, they'd turn to me and say, "You're doing fine, you don't need help." Like stability was a reason to be ignored. I graduated with a degree in accounting, got a steady job, paid off my student loans in 5 years. Logan dropped out junior year, said college was a scam, that real entrepreneurs didn't need degrees. Our parents nodded along, said he was a visionary. When he asked to borrow money from them, they didn't have it. So he came to me. Small amounts at first. 100 here, 200 there. I always said yes. He rarely paid me back. I told myself it didn't matter. That family helped family. That he'd remember when it counted. When he called that Tuesday 3 years ago asking for $50,000, part of me wanted to say no, wanted to protect myself. But the other part, the part that still believed in the idea of brotherhood, overruled it. I remember the exact moment I wired the money. I was sitting at my kitchen table, laptop open, logged into my bank account. My cursor hovered over the confirm transfer button for a full minute. I thought about calling him, asking more questions, demanding collateral. But then I thought about all the times he looked up to me as a brother, all the times I'd promised I'd be there for him. So I clicked. Watched my account balance drop from $72,000 to $22,000 in an instant. Watched the confirmation email arrive. I called him to let him know it was done. He answered on the first ring, said I was saving his life, said he'd never forget this, said he loved me, I believed him. The first 6 months, he checked in regularly, sent updates about the business, said things were turning around, said he'd landed a big client, said he was on track to pay me back early. I felt good about the decision. Felt like I'd done the right thing. Then the updates slowed, the texts got shorter. The timelines got fuzzier. By month 7, I had to initiate every conversation. By month 10, he stopped responding altogether. By month 12, I was blocked. And somewhere in that process, I stopped being his brother and started being a problem he wanted to erase. Sitting in my apartment that night after serving him, I pulled out an old photo album my mom had given me years ago. Pictures of us as young people. Logan on my shoulders at a carnival. The two of us building a snow fort in the backyard. His high school graduation, me standing next to him in the family photo, smiling, proud. I stared at those images, trying to reconcile them with the man who'd slammed the door in my face a few hours earlier. Trying to figure out when we'd gone from brothers to strangers. Or maybe we'd always been strangers. Maybe I'd just been too hopeful to notice. The 30 days came and went like a slow bleed. I didn't hear from Logan. Not a call, not a text, not even an angry email. Just silence. Cold, deliberate silence. Abigail warned me this might happen. She said people who dodge debt often think that if they ignore it long enough, it'll disappear. But court orders don't disappear. They escalate. So when day 31 arrived and my bank account showed no deposit, no wire transfer, no check in the mail, I called Abigail and told her to move forward with asset seizure. She said it would take another few weeks to process, that we'd need to file additional motions, but that we had options: bank levies, wage garnishment, property liens. I told her to do whatever was necessary. 2 weeks later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously, expecting a telemarketer. Instead, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in years. My mother. She didn't say hello, didn't ask how I was, just launched straight into it, asking me if I knew what I was doing to Logan. I blinked, caught off guard, asked her what she meant. She said he'd called her crying, told her I was trying to ruin his life, that I'd taken him to court over money, that I was threatening to take his house. Her voice was sharp, accusatory. She asked me how I could do this to my own brother. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I asked her if Logan had told her why I took him to court. She said he mentioned a loan, but that it was supposed to be family helping family, not a business transaction. I asked her if he'd mentioned the $50,000. She went quiet for a second, then said that was between us, that she wasn't getting involved in our finances. I told her he'd blocked me for 2 years. She said maybe I'd been too pushy. I told her he bought a $1 million house while I worked 70-hour weeks to rebuild my savings. She said people's financial situations were complicated, that I didn't know what he was going through. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, listening to my own mother defend the brother who'd stolen from me, and I realized something I should have seen years ago. I was the stable one, the responsible one, the one who didn't need defending. So I didn't get it. Logan was the one who struggled, who needed help, who deserved grace. And no matter what he did, no matter how badly he betrayed me, I'd always be the bad guy for holding him accountable. I told my mother I had to go. She said we needed to talk about this, that I was tearing the family apart. I told her the family tore apart the moment Logan decided $50,000 was worth more than his word. Then I hung up. I didn't cry. I wanted to, but the tears wouldn't come. Just this hollow ache that settled deep in my ribs and wouldn't leave. I thought about calling her back, trying to explain, trying to make her see my side. But I knew it wouldn't matter. She'd already chosen. They always did. I poured myself a drink, something I rarely did, and sat on my couch staring at the wall until the room got dark and the streetlights outside flickered on. The next day, I went to work like normal, smiled at clients, reviewed spreadsheets, pretended everything was fine, but inside, I was unraveling. I kept thinking about that phone call. About the way my mother's voice had sounded disappointed in me. About how easily Logan had spun the narrative, made himself the victim, made me the villain. I wondered if he actually believed it, if he'd convinced himself that I was in the wrong, or if he just didn't care. That Friday, Abigail called with an update. She said the bank levy had been approved, that starting Monday, a portion of Logan's bank accounts would be frozen and redirected to me. She said it wasn't the full amount, but it was a start. I thanked her, hung up, and felt nothing. No relief, no satisfaction, just exhaustion. I was tired of fighting. Tired of being the one who had to push. Tired of being made to feel like wanting what I was owed made me selfish. But I kept going, because stopping would mean letting him win. And I couldn't do that. Not after everything. So I showed up, filed the paperwork, attended the hearings, did everything the system required. And slowly, painfully, the wheels started turning. The bank levy went through. $1,700 redirected from Logan's account to mine. It wasn't much, a fraction of what he owed. But it was something. Proof that the system worked. Proof that I wasn't crazy for expecting accountability. Logan called me after the levy hit. First time I'd heard his voice in over a year. He was furious, yelling, asking me if I was happy now, if I felt good about myself, if this was what I wanted. I stayed calm, told him all he had to do was pay what he owed and this would stop. He said he didn't have it. I asked him how he afforded a Tesla. He said that was financed. I asked him how he afforded $1 million house. He said that was mortgaged. I told him that wasn't my problem. He said I was heartless. I told him he'd taught me how to be. The call ended with him threatening to countersue. For what? I didn't know. Harassment, maybe. Emotional distress. He said his lawyer would be in touch. I told him to make sure his lawyer talked to mine. Then I hung up. My hands were shaking. Not from fear. From anger. From the audacity of him trying to make me the bad guy when he was the one who'd lied, who'd stolen, who'd ghosted me for years. I wanted to scream. Wanted to throw my phone across the room. But I didn't. I just sat there, breathing slowly, reminding myself that anger wouldn't help. Only action would. Over the next few weeks, more levies went through, small amounts. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. It was like pulling teeth. Logan started moving money around, opening new accounts, trying to stay ahead of the seizures. But Abigail was smart. She filed motions to track his assets, to freeze new accounts, to put liens on property. It became a chess game. Him trying to hide. Me trying to find. And every move cost time, cost money, cost energy I didn't have. I stopped sleeping well. Started waking up at 3 in the morning, mind racing, thinking about next steps, worst-case scenarios, what I'd do if this dragged on for years. I lost weight. Stopped going out with friends. Stopped answering calls from family. My mom tried a few more times, leaving voicemails about how I needed to forgive, how family was more important than money. I deleted them without listening all the way through. My dad called once, said he didn't want to get involved, but maybe I should consider letting it go. I told him I'd let it go the moment Logan paid me back. He sighed, said I was being stubborn. I said I learned from the best. He didn't call again. The isolation was the worst part. I'd always thought of myself as someone with a support system. Friends, family, people who'd have my back. But when it came down to it, when I actually needed someone to say, "You're right, what he did was wrong, you deserve better," no one did. They all hedged. All said things like, "I see both sides," or "Family's complicated," or "Maybe there's a way to work this out without lawyers." Like I hadn't tried. Like I hadn't spent 2 years calling, texting, begging for just a conversation. Like I was the unreasonable one. But then, something unexpected happened. I got an email from someone I barely knew. A guy named Matthew Moore, who worked in the same office building as me. Different company, but we'd chatted a few times in the elevator. He said he'd heard through mutual connections about what I was going through. Said he'd been in a similar situation with a business partner who'd screwed him over. Said if I ever needed to talk, he was around. I almost deleted it. Almost wrote it off as empty politeness. But something made me respond. We met for coffee that weekend. And for the first time in months, I talked to someone who didn't immediately try to defend the person who'd wronged me. Someone who just listened. Who said, "That's messed up. You didn't deserve that." Simple, direct, true. Matthew became the first thread in what would eventually become a new kind of support system. Not family, not people obligated to care, just people who chose to, who saw what was happening and said, "This isn't right." It wasn't much. but it was enough to remind me that I wasn't crazy, that wanting accountability wasn't selfish, that protecting yourself wasn't betrayal. And slowly, quietly, that realization started to shift something inside me. I stopped waiting for my family to validate me. Stopped hoping Logan would wake up one day and apologize. I just kept moving forward, one levy at a time, one court date at a time, one small victory at a time. Because whether anyone else understood or not, I knew the truth. And that had to be enough. Matthew Moore turned out to be more than just a guy from the elevator. Over the next few weeks, our coffee meetings became a regular thing. Every Saturday morning at a diner called the Griddle House on Palmer Street, halfway between our apartments, he'd order black coffee and wheat toast. I'd get whatever was cheapest on the menu. We'd sit in the same booth by the window, and I'd update him on the case. He never gave me advice I didn't ask for, never told me what I should or shouldn't do. He just listened. And when I'd finished talking, he'd nod slowly and say something like, "Sounds like you're handling it," or "That took guts." One morning, about 6 weeks into the legal battle, I showed up at the Griddle House, looking like I hadn't slept in days, which I hadn't. The previous night, I'd received another email from Abigail. Logan had filed a motion to dismiss the garnishment, claiming financial hardship. The irony was suffocating. A man living in a Hillcrest Estates mansion claiming he couldn't afford to pay back a loan. But the court had to review it. Another delay. Another hoop to jump through. Another reminder that the system moved at the speed of molasses while my life stayed on hold. Matthew took one look at me and ordered extra toast without asking. He slid it across the table with a packet of butter. "Eat," he said. "You look like you're running on fumes." I picked at the corner of a slice but couldn't bring myself to take a real bite. My stomach had been in knots for weeks. He didn't push, just sipped his coffee and waited. Finally, I told him about the motion. About how Logan was trying to paint himself as the struggling victim while I was the villain squeezing him dry. Matthew set his mug down slowly. "You know what the worst part of betrayal is?" he asked. I looked up. It's not the act itself. It's watching the person rewrite history so they can sleep at night. That hit me harder than I expected, because that's exactly what Logan was doing, rewriting our story, turning my help into manipulation, my patience into harassment, my refusal to let him off the hook into cruelty. Matthew leaned forward, elbows on the table. "When my business partner screwed me over," he said, "he told everyone I was a control freak who couldn't handle his success. Never mind that I'd fronted him the capital. Never mind that I'd worked 18-hour days while he schmoozed clients and took credit. By the time I realized what was happening, half our mutual contacts believed his version. I asked him how he dealt with it. He shrugged. Stop trying to convince people. Stop defending myself. Just focused on the facts. Court documents don't lie. Numbers don't lie. Eventually the truth came out. Not to everyone. Some people still think I'm the bad guy. But the ones who matter figured it out. I thought about that. About how exhausting it was to constantly defend myself. To explain over and over why I wasn't wrong for wanting my money back. Matthew must have seen something shift in my face because he reached across the table and tapped the back of my hand once, quick and light. "You're doing the right thing," he said, "even if it doesn't feel like it. Especially because it doesn't feel like it." I nodded. Managed half a piece of toast. It tasted like cardboard, but I swallowed it anyway. That same week, something else unexpected happened. I got a LinkedIn message from a woman named Hannah Clark. The name didn't ring a bell at first. Then I opened her profile. She worked in legal consulting, specialized in debt recovery. Her message was short, but direct. Said she'd been following my case through mutual professional circles, that Abigail had mentioned it in a seminar. Said if I ever needed a second opinion or additional resources, she'd be happy to talk. No charge. Just professional courtesy. I stared at the message for a long time, suspicious. In my experience, people didn't offer help without wanting something in return. But I was desperate enough to take the chance, I replied. We set up a call for that Thursday evening. Hannah turned out to be sharp, efficient, and refreshingly blunt. She didn't waste time with pleasantries. She asked me to walk her through the timeline. I did. She asked for specifics, dollar amounts, dates, exact wording from the loan agreement. I sent her everything. She reviewed it in real time, humming occasionally, clicking her tongue at certain parts. When I finished, she let out a low whistle. "Your brother's an idiot," she said flatly. I laughed, despite myself. "Why do you say that?" She rattled off a list. Signed, notarized agreement. Clear repayment terms. Paper trail of acknowledgement. No legal defense. He could have settled this quietly for half the amount 2 years ago. Instead, he ghosted you, which makes him look worse, bought assets he can't hide, which makes him look stupid, and now he's filing frivolous motions, which makes him look desperate. If I were his lawyer, I'd tell him to pay you and move on. I asked her why she thought he hadn't. She paused. Pride, shame, entitlement. Take your pick. People like your brother don't see themselves as the villain. They see themselves as the victim of circumstances. He probably genuinely believes he's being treated unfairly. That sounded exactly like Logan, Hannah continued. The good news is, you've got him cornered. The bad news is, cornered people get messy. Be prepared for him to escalate. Smear campaigns, family pressure, maybe even allegations. I asked what kind of allegations. She said anything that made him look sympathetic. False claims of harassment, exaggerated stories about your relationship, lies about the origin of the loan. I felt my chest tighten. She must have heard it in my silence because her voice softened slightly. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to prepare you. Stick to the facts. Don't engage emotionally. Let the court do its job. We talked for another 20 minutes. She gave me some tactical advice. Suggested filing a counter-motion to expedite the garnishment review. Recommended documenting every interaction with Logan in case things got ugly. Offered to consult with Abigail directly if needed. By the time we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not hope exactly. More like clarity. A sense that I wasn't alone in this fight. That there were people who understood the game and were willing to help me navigate it. The next morning, I forwarded Hannah's notes to Abigail. She called me within an hour. Said Hannah's advice was solid, that she'd already started drafting the counter-motion. She also warned me that Logan's lawyer, or whoever he eventually hired, might try to drag this out as long as possible. Delay tactics, procedural objections, anything to exhaust me into giving up. I told her I wasn't giving up. She said she didn't think I would. There was something in her voice, a kind of quiet respect, that made me sit up a little straighter. Around this time, I also started attending a support group. Not for debt recovery or legal battles, but for people dealing with family estrangement. I found it through an online search one sleepless night. The meetings were held every Tuesday evening in the basement of a community center on the east side of town. I almost didn't go to the first one. Sat in my car in the parking lot for 15 minutes, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel, convincing myself I didn't need this, that I could handle it on my own. But something made me get out. Maybe curiosity, maybe desperation, maybe just the bone-deep exhaustion of carrying everything alone. The group was small, 8 people, all ages, all backgrounds. A middle-aged woman estranged from her adult daughter, a young man who hadn't spoken to his parents in 5 years, an older gentleman who'd cut ties with his siblings over an inheritance dispute. We sat in a circle on folding chairs. The facilitator, a calm woman in her 50s named Grace Harris, started each meeting the same way. No one here is required to share, but if you do, know that your experience is valid. We don't fix each other, we just witness. I didn't share that first night, just listened, heard stories that mirrored pieces of my own. The guilt, the doubt, the constant questioning of whether I was doing the right thing. The isolation that came from choosing boundaries over peace. The second week, I shared, kept it short, said my brother owed me money, that I'd taken him to court, that my family thought I was wrong for it. The room was silent when I finished. Then the older gentleman, his name was Anthony White, spoke up. "You're not wrong," he said. "You're just the first one to stop playing pretend." Those words settled into me like stones in still water. Heavy, but grounding. After the meeting, a few people came up to me, offered quiet words of encouragement, shared similar stories. gave me their numbers in case I needed to talk. I walked out of that basement feeling lighter than I had in months, not because my problems were solved, but because I'd been seen, really seen, by people who didn't need me to justify my choices. Over the following weeks, the support group became a lifeline, a place where I could say things I couldn't say anywhere else, where I could admit that I was angry, hurt, scared, exhausted, without someone immediately trying to fix it or minimize it or redirect me toward forgiveness. Grace, the facilitator, had a way of asking questions that made you think. One night, she asked me, "What would closure look like for you?" I'd never really thought about it. I assumed closure meant getting my money back. But when I sat with the question, I realized it was more than that. Closure meant knowing I'd done everything I could, that I hadn't let fear or guilt or family pressure stop me from standing up for myself, that I'd honored my own worth even when no one else would. Matthew, Hannah, the support group, they weren't replacing my family. They were something different, something I'd never really had before. People who showed up not because they had to, but because they chose to, who saw me struggling and said, "I'll sit with you in this." There was no obligation, no shared history forcing them to care, just human decency. And somehow, that made it mean more. I started to understand that family wasn't just biology. It was presence. It was consistency. It was people proving, over and over, that they valued you enough to stay. One Saturday, after our usual breakfast at the Griddle House, Matthew asked if I wanted to go for a walk. We ended up at Crescent Park, a small green space with a pond and a paved loop trail. The weather was cool, the kind of crisp autumn air that makes everything feel a little more bearable. We walked in silence for a while. Then Matthew said, "You seem different." I asked him what he meant. He thought about it. "Steadier?" he said, "like you're not waiting for permission anymore." I realized he was right. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped needing my family to validate my decision. Stopped needing Logan to admit he was wrong. Stopped needing anyone to tell me I was justified. I just knew. And that knowing, quiet and solid, was enough. By the time we finished the loop and headed back to the parking lot, the sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, casting everything in that golden late afternoon light. Matthew clapped me on the shoulder once before getting in his car. "Keep going," he said. "Not good luck or, I hope it works out. Just keep going." And I did. The counter motion went through. The court denied Logan's claim of financial hardship after Abigail presented evidence of his recent purchases: a Tesla, a luxury watch she'd posted on social media, reservations at high-end restaurants. The judge wasn't amused. The garnishment was reinstated, and this time, the court added penalties for filing a frivolous motion. Logan owed me an additional $3,000 in legal fees. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt numb, like I'd won a battle in a war that shouldn't have existed in the first place. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad and a pen. I'd been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of processing, and I needed to get it out of my head. I started writing. Not a letter to Logan. Not a statement for court. Just thoughts. Raw, unfiltered thoughts about what this whole experience had taught me. I wrote about trust. About how I'd given it freely to someone who'd never earned it. About how I'd confused biological connection with loyalty. I wrote about the difference between helping someone and enabling them. About how I'd spent years bailing Logan out, covering for him, making excuses, and how none of it had ever made him a better person. It had just taught him that consequences were optional. I wrote about my parents. About how their inability to hold Logan accountable had shaped both of us. How he'd learned that charm could replace responsibility. How I'd learned that being reliable meant being invisible. I wrote about the phone call with my mother. About how much it hurt to realize she cared more about keeping the peace than about what was right. About how I'd spent my whole life trying to be the son who didn't cause problems, and how that had made me the son who didn't matter. The pen moved faster. I wrote about the moment I'd stopped waiting for an apology. The moment I'd realized that Logan wasn't going to wake up one day and suddenly become the brother I deserved. That he was who he was. And that accepting that didn't mean I had to accept being treated poorly. It just meant I had to stop expecting something he wasn't capable of giving. I wrote about the support I'd found: Matthew, Hannah, Grace. The The people in the support group. How they'd shown me what real support looked like. Not just words. Not just empty promises. But action. Presence. Consistency. I wrote about how lonely I'd felt for so long, even when I was surrounded by family. And how much less lonely I felt now, even though I'd never been more isolated from the people I'd grown up with. I filled 7 pages. By the time I put the pen down, my hand was cramping and my eyes were burning. But my chest felt lighter, like I'd set something down that I'd been carrying for too long. The next day, I did something I'd been avoiding. I went through my phone and unfollowed Logan on the fake Instagram account I'd been using to keep tabs on him. I didn't block him, didn't make a statement, just quietly removed myself from his audience, stopped consuming the curated highlight reel of a life he wanted people to believe he was living. It felt small, insignificant, but it mattered. Because it was a choice. A decision to stop letting him occupy space in my daily thoughts. To stop checking what he was doing, where he was going, who he was impressing. It wasn't my business anymore. And more importantly, I didn't want it to be. I also drafted an email to my mother. Took me 3 days to get the wording right. I didn't want it to be angry. Didn't want it to be a manifesto. Just clear. Honest. I told her I loved her. That I understood she was in a difficult position. But that I needed her to understand mine. That I hadn't taken Logan to court to hurt him. I'd done it because he'd left me no other option. That I'd tried for years to resolve this privately, and he'd chosen to ignore me. That the court order wasn't revenge, it was accountability. I told her I wasn't asking her to pick sides, but I was asking her to stop acting like I was wrong for refusing to be a doormat. I told her that until she could do that, I needed space. I read the email a dozen times. Changed a word here, a phrase there, then I hit send before I could second-guess myself. She replied 2 days later. Her response was short. Said she didn't want to lose me, that she didn't understand why this had to be so complicated, that she wished I could just let it go. I read it once and didn't respond, because there was nothing left to say. She still didn't get it, and maybe she never would, but that wasn't my responsibility anymore. I'd said what I needed to say. The rest was up to her. Around this time, the garnishments started adding up. 5,000, then 8. Then 12. It was still a long way from 57,000. But it was progress. Tangible, measurable progress. Each notification from the court felt like a small reclaiming of something that had been taken from me. Not just money, dignity, self-respect, the belief that I deserved to be treated with basic decency. I started putting the garnished money into a separate account. Didn't touch it. Didn't spend it. Just watched it grow. Proof that persistence paid off. That standing your ground, even when everyone told you to let it go, wasn't futile. One evening, I got a text from Matthew. Dinner tomorrow? My treat. Got something to celebrate. I asked what. He replied with a smiley face, which was rare for him. We met at a small Italian place on the north side of town. He was already seated when I arrived. 2 glasses of water on the table. He stood when he saw me, which he never did, and shook my hand firmly. Sit, he said, grinning. I sat. He slid a folder across the table. Open it. Inside was a check. Made out to me. For $1,500. I looked up confused. What is this? He leaned back, arms crossed, looking proud. Remember when I told you about my business partner, the one who screwed me over? I nodded. I finally settled. Got a chunk of what he owed me. Not all of it, but enough. And I thought about what helped me get through that whole mess. You know what it was? I shook my head. People who showed up. People who believed me when everyone else thought I was being petty. So I'm paying it forward. Use it however you want. Legal fees. Groceries. A vacation. I don't care. Just know you're not alone in this. I stared at the check. My throat tightened. Matthew, I can't take this. He waved me off. Yes, you can, and you will. Because someone did the same for me. And it made all the difference. Not because of the money. Because it reminded me that good people still exist. I didn't know what to say. So I just folded the check carefully, put it back in the folder and said, "Thank you." He nodded once, satisfied, and flagged down the waiter. "Now let's eat. I'm starving." That night, lying in bed, I thought about everything that had shifted over the past few months. I'd started this fight thinking it was about money, about getting back what was stolen. But somewhere along the way, it had become about something bigger. It was about refusing to shrink, refusing to accept being erased, refusing to let someone's betrayal define my worth. I thought about the person I'd been 3 years ago, wiring $50,000 to a brother who'd promised to pay me back. That version of me had been hopeful, trusting, maybe a little naive. I wasn't that person anymore. And for the first time, I didn't mourn the loss, because the person I'd become was stronger, clearer, less willing to settle for crumbs of respect. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. Started typing. Things I know now. 1. Trust is earned, not owed. 2. Helping someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself. 3. Blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. 4. Standing up for yourself isn't selfish. 5. The right people will show up. 6. Closure doesn't always come from the person who hurt you. Sometimes it comes from within. I read it back, added one more line. 7. I am worth fighting for. Then I saved it, titled it Truths, and went to sleep. The letter arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Plain white envelope, no return address. But I recognized the handwriting immediately. Logan's. Messy, slanted. The same scrawl he'd used on birthday cards when we were younger. I stood in my apartment hallway, mail in one hand, keys in the other, staring at that envelope like it might explode. Part of me wanted to throw it away unopened. The other part needed to know what he had to say after months of silence, punctuated only by legal documents and court orders. I went inside, set my keys on the counter, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down at the kitchen table. Took a breath, opened it. The letter was 2 pages, front and back, written in blue ink. No date, just words. "Ryan, I don't even know if you'll read this. Maybe you'll just throw it away. I wouldn't blame you. But I needed to write it anyway. Not because I think it'll change anything. Just because I need you to know some things. First, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean much now. I know I should have said it a long time ago. But I'm saying it now. I'm sorry for taking your money. I'm sorry for ghosting you. I'm sorry for making you feel like you didn't matter. You did matter. You do matter. I was just too messed up to show it. When I asked you for that money, I really did need it. The business was failing. I was drowning. And you were the only person I trusted enough to ask. But after you sent it, something happened. I got scared. Scared that I'd let you down. Scared that I wouldn't be able to pay you back. Scared that you'd see me the way I saw myself, like a failure. So I avoided you. And the longer I avoided you, the harder it got to reach out. Until it felt impossible. I stopped reading, set the letter down, rubbed my eyes. This was classic Logan. The apology wrapped in justification. The acknowledgement wrapped in excuses. I picked it back up. I know that's not an excuse. I know I hurt you. And I know taking me to court was the only option I left you. I don't blame you for that. I blame myself. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few months. About who I am. About the choices I've made. About how I treated the people who cared about me. And I don't like what I see. Mom called me after you guys talked. She said you were tearing the family apart. But I told her that wasn't true. I told her I tore it apart. Not you. You were just the one who stopped pretending everything was fine. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to respond to this. But I wanted you to know that I see what I did. And I'm trying to do better. I've been meeting with a financial advisor. Trying to figure out how to pay you back faster. It's not enough. It'll never be enough. But it's something. I also wanted you to know that the house, the car, all of it, it's not what it looks like. I'm leveraged to hell. The mortgage is killing me. The Tesla is leased. I'm one bad month away from losing everything. I'm not saying that to make you feel sorry for me. I'm saying it because I want you to understand that the life you saw on Instagram wasn't real. It was a performance. And I was so busy performing that I forgot how to be a decent person. I miss you. I miss my brother. I know I don't deserve to. But I do. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. If you don't, I understand. Either way, I hope you're doing okay. You deserved better than what I gave you, Logan. I read the letter 3 times. Each time, I felt something different. The first time, anger. How dare he try to make me feel bad for him now? The second time, sadness. Because somewhere in that mess of words was the brother I used to know, the one who called me when he was scared, the one who looked up to me. The third time, clarity. Because none of it changed anything. An apology without action was just words. And words were what Logan had always been good at. I folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and placed it in a drawer. I didn't respond, didn't text him, didn't call. Because responding would mean reopening a door I'd worked hard to close. And I wasn't ready for that. Maybe I never would be. 2 weeks later, I got a call from Abigail. She sounded different, not her usual calm, professional tone. There was an edge to her voice, something urgent. "Ryan, we need to talk. Can you come to my office today?" I checked the time. It was almost 5. I told her I could be there in 30 minutes. She said she'd wait. When I arrived, she was standing by the window, arms crossed, looking out at the street below. She turned when I walked in. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. I sat. She stayed standing for a moment, then finally took her seat. "Logan's lawyer reached out this morning." I straightened. "He has a lawyer now?" She nodded. "As of yesterday. And they made an offer." I leaned forward. "What kind of offer?" Abigail slid a printed email across the desk. I scanned it. Logan was offering to settle. $35,000, paid in full within 60 days. In exchange, I dropped the case, release all liens, and sign a non-disclosure agreement preventing me from discussing the matter publicly. I looked up. "He's offering me less than what he owes." Abigail nodded. "Significantly less. After penalties and interest, he owes you $62,000. He's offering a little over half." I sat back, processing. Why would he think I'd take that? Abigail tapped the desk with her pen. "Because his lawyer knows that court cases are expensive, time-consuming, uncertain. They're betting you're tired. That you'd rather take a guaranteed payout now than keep fighting for the full amount." I asked her what she thought. She considered it carefully. "Financially, it's not a terrible offer. $35,000 is better than zero. And if he actually pays it within 60 days, you'd have the money in hand. No more court dates. No more stress. But," she paused, "it also means he wins in a way. He gets to walk away having paid 30% less than what he owes. And the non-disclosure clause means he controls the narrative. You can't tell anyone what happened. Can't warn anyone about what kind of person he is." I thought about the letter, about the apology that had felt hollow, about the years of avoidance and lies, about my mother's phone call, about every time I'd been told to just let it go, to stop being difficult, to choose peace over justice. I looked at Abigail. "What happens if I say no?" She smiled slightly. "We keep going. We push for the full amount. It'll take longer, cost more in legal fees. But you'd be fighting for what's actually owed." I didn't hesitate. "Tell them no." Abigail raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" I nodded. I didn't come this far to settle for scraps. He had 3 years to do the right thing. He chose not to. Now he pays the full price. She picked up her phone. "I'll draft the response today." As I stood to leave, she said my name. I turned. "For what it's worth," she said, "I think you're making the right call. A lot of people would have taken the money and run. But you're proving a point. And sometimes that matters more than the dollar amount." I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger, not bitterness. Something closer to resolve. A quiet, unyielding certainty that I wasn't backing down. Not for him, not for my family, not for anyone. The rejection hit Logan hard. I know because 3 days later, he called me. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. Then he texted. A long, rambling message about how I was being unreasonable, how he was trying to make things right, how I was dragging this out for no reason. I didn't respond. He called from a different number. I blocked it. Then my mother called. I answered, against my better judgment. "Ryan, please, just talk to your brother, he's trying." I asked her if she knew about the settlement offer. She said she did. I asked her if she knew it was $30,000 less than what he owed me. She went quiet, then said, "Sometimes you have to compromise." I felt something snap, not loudly, just a clean final break. "Mom, I compromised for 3 years. I compromised every time I didn't call him out for ignoring me. Every time I made excuses for him to our family. Every time I told myself he'd come around. I'm done compromising." She started to say something, but I cut her off. "If you want to support him, that's your choice. But don't ask me to set myself on fire to keep him warm." I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from release. That weekend, Matthew invited me to a barbecue at his place. Small gathering. Just a few people from work, some neighbors. I almost said no, I wasn't in the mood to be social. But he insisted. Said I needed to get out of my head for a few hours. So I went. His backyard was modest, but comfortable. String lights hung between trees. A grill smoking in the corner. People laughing, talking, completely unaware of the war. One was fighting in my personal life. And for a few hours, I let myself forget too. I ate a burger. Drank a beer. Talked about nothing important with people who didn't know my history. And it felt good, not healing exactly, but human, normal. At one point, Matthew pulled me aside. "You doing okay?" he asked. I shrugged. "Define okay." He laughed. "Fair. But seriously, you seem lighter." I thought about it. I think I finally stopped caring what they think. My family. Logan. All of them. I spent so long trying to make them see my side. But they don't want to see it. And that's not my problem anymore. Matthew clapped me on the shoulder. "That's growth, man. That's real growth." Later that night, back in my apartment, I pulled out the letter Logan had sent. Read it one more time. And this time, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no longing for the brother he used to be, just indifference. And I realized that was the real closure. Not an apology, not a payment, not reconciliation, just the absence of emotional investment. I folded the letter one last time and threw it away. Didn't keep it for evidence. Didn't save it for some future conversation. Just tossed it in the trash and walked away. Because some things don't deserve space in your life. Not even as memories. The court date for the final hearing was set for 6 weeks out. Abigail warned me that Logan's lawyer would likely try one more settlement offer, maybe even a better one. But I'd already made up my mind. I wasn't settling. Not because I needed every dollar, though I did, but because settling would mean validating the idea that what he did was negotiable. That betrayal had a discount rate. And I refused to accept that. Some things aren't for sale. Dignity. Self-respect. The principle that when you give someone your word, you honor it. Those things were worth more than any settlement check. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No grand wooden panels or dramatic lighting like you see on television. Just beige walls, fluorescent lights, and rows of uncomfortable benches that creaked every time someone shifted their weight. I sat in the second row, Abigail beside me, a folder of documents on her lap. Across the aisle, Logan sat with his lawyer, a sharply dressed man in his 50s with silver hair and an expensive watch. Logan wore a suit I'd never seen before. Probably bought it for this. He looked thinner than the last time I'd seen him. Tired. His hands fidgeted with a pen, clicking it open and closed in a rhythm that betrayed his nerves. The judge entered, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on her nose and an expression that suggested she'd seen every excuse in the book. We stood. She sat. We sat. The bailiff called the case number. Abigail stood first, presented our side cleanly and methodically. The signed loan agreement, the wire transfer records, the timeline of ignored communication, the blocked numbers, the social media evidence of expensive purchases. She didn't editorialize, didn't make it personal, Just laid out the facts like dominoes, each one falling into the next, building an irrefutable pattern. Logan's lawyer stood next. He tried the sympathy angle. Painted Logan as a struggling entrepreneur who'd hit hard times, who'd made mistakes but was trying to rebuild, who'd offered a good-faith settlement that had been unreasonably rejected. He mentioned family. Said this was a tragedy, two brothers at war over money when they should be supporting each other. He suggested that perhaps the court could mediate a compromise, something fair to both parties. Abigail objected, pointed out that fairness meant honoring the contract both parties had signed. The judge agreed. Then the judge asked Logan directly, "Mr. Martinez, did you sign this loan agreement?" Logan stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Did you receive the $50,000 outlined in this agreement?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And did you make any payments toward this debt in the 3 years since receiving the funds?" Logan hesitated. His lawyer whispered something. Logan shook his head. "No, Your Honor." The judge removed her glasses, looked at him for a long moment. "Why not?" Logan swallowed, started to speak, stopped, started again. "I was struggling financially. I thought if I waited until I was in a better position, I could pay him back all at once. But then time passed, and it got harder to reach out, and I made bad decisions. I should have communicated better. I know that now." The judge's expression didn't soften. "Mr. Martinez, this court deals in contracts, not intentions. You signed an agreement. You failed to honor it. Your brother pursued legal recourse, which was his right. Do you dispute the amount owed, including penalties and interest, as calculated by the plaintiff's counsel?" Logan looked at his lawyer. The lawyer nodded slightly. Logan turned back to the judge. "No, Your Honor, I don't dispute it." The judge made a note. "Then this court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Full judgment, $62,000 to be paid within 90 days. If payment is not received in full by that deadline, additional penalties will apply. And the plaintiff is authorized to pursue asset seizure, including but not limited to property liens and vehicle repossession. Is that clear?" Logan's face went pale. "Yes, Your Honor." The gavel came down. Sharp, final. We stood. The judge left. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in an hour. Abigail turned to me, a small smile on her face. "That's it. You won." I nodded, but I didn't feel triumphant, just tired, relieved. Like I'd been holding my breath underwater and finally broke the surface. Logan's lawyer packed his briefcase quickly, whispered something to Logan, and left without looking at me. Logan stayed seated for a moment, staring at the table in front of him. I thought about walking over, saying something. But what was there to say? The court had said everything that mattered. So I turned and walked out, Abigail beside me, into the bright afternoon sunlight. Outside the courthouse, Abigail shook my hand. 90 days, she said. If he doesn't pay, we move to asset seizure. But my guess is he will. He knows we're serious now. I asked her what happens if he doesn't have the money. She shrugged. Then we take the house, the car, whatever we can liquidate. That's what liens are for. I thanked her, told her I'd wait for her invoice. She waved me off. Already sent it, check your email. I laughed despite myself. She smiled. Go celebrate. You earned it. I didn't celebrate. Not in the traditional sense. No party, no drinks. I just went home, changed into comfortable clothes, and sat on my couch in the quiet. I thought about calling Matthew, texting the support group, letting someone know. But I didn't. Because this moment didn't need witnesses. It was mine. After months of fighting, of sleepless nights, of second-guessing, of being told I was wrong for standing up for myself, I'd won. Not just in court, but in the deeper sense. I'd proven to myself that I was worth fighting for, that my boundaries mattered, that my word, my time, my money, they all had value. And anyone who couldn't respect that didn't deserve access to me. Later that evening, my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This is Logan. I'll pay you. You'll get your money. But I want you to know this destroyed what was left of our relationship. I hope it was worth it." I stared at the message for a long time. Then, I typed a response. "You destroyed our relationship the moment you decided $50,000 was worth more than your word. I just stopped pretending otherwise." I hit send. Blocked the number. And that was the last time I heard from him. The 90 days passed slowly. I tracked the deadline on my calendar, a red circle around the date like a finish line. Part of me expected him to miss it. to force me into asset seizure, to drag this out even longer. But on day 87, a wire transfer hit my account. $62,000. In full. I stared at the notification on my phone, sitting in my office during lunch break, and felt something I hadn't expected. Not relief. Not satisfaction. Just a quiet kind of emptiness. Because getting the money back didn't undo the years of betrayal. Didn't repair the broken trust. Didn't restore the relationship. It just closed a chapter I'd been stuck in for too long. I forwarded the confirmation to Abigail. She replied within minutes. "Congratulations. Case closed. Lien released." "You're done." I sat back in my chair, exhaled slowly, and realized I didn't know what to do next. I'd spent so long focused on this fight that I'd forgotten what life looked like without it. That night, I met Matthew at the Griddle House. Same booth. Same black coffee and wheat toast for him. I ordered a full breakfast this time. Eggs, bacon, pancakes. He raised an eyebrow. "Celebrating?" I shrugged. "Something like that." He asked me how I felt. I told him the truth. Empty. Like I won, but I also lost something I can't get back. He nodded slowly. "That's because you did. You lost the version of your family you thought you had. But you gained something too. You gained yourself." I looked at him. "That sounds like something Grace would say." He laughed. "Maybe I've been spending too much time at those support group meetings." We ate in comfortable silence. When the check came, Matthew grabbed it before I could. "This one's on me," he said. I didn't argue. As we walked to our cars, he stopped me. "You know what comes next, right?" I asked him what he meant. "You rebuild. Not the relationship with Logan, not the family dynamic. You rebuild your life, the way you want it, with people who actually show up. That's the real win." Over the following weeks, I did exactly that. I started saying yes to invitations I would have declined before, went to more barbecues, joined a rec league for basketball, something I hadn't done since college, reconnected with old friends I'd drifted away from during the legal battle. Slowly, carefully, I built a life that wasn't defined by what I'd lost, but by what I was choosing to create. I also made a decision about the money. I kept $20,000 to rebuild my savings, the cushion I'd lost 3 years ago. Another $10,000 went to paying off Abigail's final invoice and covering other legal costs. The rest, $32,000, I split into 2 donations. Half went to a legal aid nonprofit that helped people pursue debt recovery cases who couldn't afford lawyers. The other half went to the community center that hosted the support group, funding their programs for the next year. When Grace found out, she called me, voice thick with emotion. "Ryan, you didn't have to do this." I told her I did. Because those meetings had saved me in ways a court order never could. And if my pain could fund someone else's healing, then maybe it meant something. I didn't tell Logan what I did with the money, didn't post about it, didn't make a public statement. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about closing the loop, taking something that had been stolen, and turning it into something that mattered. The last piece of liberation came unexpectedly. I was walking through Crescent Park one Saturday morning, same loop I'd walked with Matthew months ago, when I saw them, my parents, sitting on a bench near the pond, feeding ducks. I froze, considered turning around, but something made me keep walking. As I got closer, my mother looked up, recognized me. Her face shifted through several expressions: surprise, guilt, something that might have been longing. My father stood. "Ryan." I stopped a few feet away. "Dad." Silence stretched between us. My mother finally spoke. "We heard the case settled." I nodded. "It did." She looked down at her hands. "Logan told us he paid you." "He did." More silence. My father cleared his throat. "We wanted to reach out, but we didn't know if you'd want to hear from us." I looked at both of them. These people who'd raised me, who'd fed me, who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework, who'd also chosen my brother's comfort over my pain, who'd asked me to shrink so he wouldn't have to grow. "I don't know if I'm ready," I said honestly. "For what?" my mother asked. "For pretending everything's fine. For going back to how things were, because how things were is what led to this." My father nodded slowly. "We weren't fair to you. We see that now." I wanted to believe him. Part of me did. But belief without change was just hope. And I'd run out of hope a long time ago. "If you want a relationship with me," I said carefully, "it has to be different. I need you to see me. Not as the stable one who doesn't need attention, but as your son who deserves the same care you gave Logan." My mother's eyes filled with tears. "We do see you. Then prove it," I said, not unkindly, just clearly. "Don't just say it. Show it. Consistently. Over time. And maybe we can rebuild something. But I'm not doing the work alone anymore." I didn't wait for a response. Just nodded once and kept walking. As I rounded the bend in the trail, I glanced back. They were still sitting there, watching me go. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for walking away. I felt free. 18 months after the court case closed, I found myself standing in front of a classroom at the community center on Fletcher Avenue. 20 folding chairs arranged in a semicircle, a whiteboard behind me with the words, "Financial Boundaries and Family" written in blue marker. Hannah Clark sat in the back row, having helped me design the curriculum. Matthew was there too, arms crossed, nodding encouragement. Grace had invited me to lead a workshop after hearing me talk about my experience in the support group. I'd said no 3 times before finally agreeing. The room filled slowly. Young people, older people, some who looked like they'd been carrying weight for years. They took their seats quietly, clutching notebooks, phones, coffee cups from the lobby. I recognized that look in their eyes. The exhaustion. The doubt. The question of whether standing up for yourself made you selfish or strong. I knew that look because I'd worn it for 3 years. I started simply. Told them my name. Told them I wasn't a financial expert or a therapist, just someone who'd learned some hard lessons about money, family, and self-worth. Then I told them the story. Not all of it. Just the outline. The loan. The ghosting. The court case. The family fallout. The eventual payment. I didn't embellish. Didn't make myself a hero. Just laid out what happened and what I learned. When I finished, hands went up immediately. A woman in her 40s asked how I dealt with the guilt. I told her the truth. The guilt never fully goes away. But over time, I learned to separate guilt from responsibility. I felt guilty because I was conditioned to prioritize keeping peace over protecting myself. But I wasn't responsible for my brother's choices. He was. And once I accepted that, the guilt got quieter. A younger man, maybe mid-20s, asked if my family ever came around. I paused on that one. Some did, some didn't. My parents and I have a relationship now, but it's different. Smaller. More honest. We see each other every few months. We don't pretend the past didn't happen, but we also don't live in it. My brother and I haven't spoken since the payment cleared. Maybe we will someday. Maybe we won't. I've made peace with both possibilities. Another woman asked the question I'd been waiting for. Was it worth it? All the time, the money, the stress, the family drama. Do you regret it? I thought carefully before answering. Worth it isn't the right question. It wasn't about worth. It was about principle, about refusing to accept being erased. If I'd let it go, I would have spent the rest of my life knowing I didn't stand up for myself when it mattered. That would have cost me more than any legal fee. So no, I don't regret it. But I also don't recommend it lightly. Court cases are brutal. They drain you. You have to be sure you're fighting for the right reasons. We talked for 2 hours. I shared resources, legal aid contacts, support group information, books that had helped me. Strategies for setting boundaries without burning bridges, and when burning bridges was actually the healthier choice. When the session ended, several people stayed behind to talk one-on-one. A man in his 50s shook my hand firmly, said his daughter had borrowed $30,000 for a business that never materialized, that he'd been feeling crazy for even considering legal action. I told him he wasn't crazy. I gave him Abigail's contact information. A younger woman, maybe 30, lingered until everyone else had left. She looked nervous. Finally, she said, My sister owes me $18,000. She's blocked me on everything. My parents think I should forgive the debt because she's struggling. But I'm struggling too. And I'm so angry I can barely sleep. Her voice cracked. I recognized that tremble. The edge of breaking. I asked her to sit. We talked for another 40 minutes. I didn't tell her what to do. Just asked her questions. What did she want? What was she afraid of? What would forgiveness look like? And did it require her to give up her money? By the end, she wasn't crying anymore. She was thinking, planning, taking her power back one question at a time. After she left, Hannah came over. "You're good at this," she said. I shrugged. "I just know what it feels like to think you're alone in it." She smiled. "That's exactly why you're good at it." Matthew joined us, hands in his pockets. "So, when's the next one?" I looked at him. "Next what?" He gestured around the room. "Workshop, talk, whatever you want to call it. People need this." You saw the room. They were hanging on every word. I hadn't planned on doing it again. This was supposed to be a one-time thing. But standing there, thinking about the faces in those chairs, the questions they'd asked, the relief in their eyes when they realized they weren't the only ones fighting these battles, I felt something shift. Maybe this was what came next. Not revenge, not bitterness, but purpose. Taking the worst thing that had happened to me and turning it into something that helped other people survive their own worst things. Over the next year, I led 6 more workshops. Each one drew bigger crowds. People started reaching out via email, asking for advice, sharing their stories. I couldn't respond to everyone, but I tried. I also started writing. Not a book, just essays. Short pieces about financial abuse, family dynamics, the cost of people-pleasing. I posted them on a simple blog Matthew helped me set up. The readership stayed small, maybe a few hundred people, but the comments were powerful. People saying they'd felt seen. That they'd thought they were wrong for wanting their money back. That reading my words gave them permission to stop shrinking. I also went back to school, part-time, for a certificate in financial counseling. If I was going to keep doing this work, I wanted to do it right. Wanted to give people more than just my story. I wanted to give them tools. The program was intensive, 2 nights a week plus weekends, but I loved it. For the first time in years, I was building towards something instead of just recovering from something. My relationship with my parents continued to evolve, slowly and carefully. We met for lunch once a month. Neutral territory, a diner halfway between our homes. Conversations were surface level at first. Weather, work, safe topics. But gradually we started going deeper. My mother apologized, really apologized, for dismissing my pain. Said she'd been so focused on protecting Logan that she hadn't seen how much she was hurting me. My father admitted he'd always seen me as the strong one, the one who didn't need help, and how unfair that had been. I didn't forgive them immediately. Forgiveness wasn't a switch I could flip. It was a process, built on small moments of them showing up differently, remembering my birthday without prompting, asking about my life without comparing it to Logan's, respecting my boundaries when I said I wasn't ready to talk about him. Those moments accumulated, and slowly, carefully, something resembling trust began to rebuild. I saw Logan once by accident, about 2 years after the case closed. I was getting coffee at a shop near my office when I looked up, and there he was, standing in line 3 people ahead of me. He looked different, older. The cockiness was gone, replaced by something more subdued. He ordered, paid, turned to leave, and our eyes met. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he gave a small nod. Not friendly, not hostile, just acknowledgement. I nodded back, he left, I stayed, got my coffee, went back to work. And that was it. No dramatic confrontation. No closure conversation. Just 2 people who used to be brothers, passing in a coffee shop, carrying on with separate lives. I thought about that moment a lot over the following weeks. Wondered if I should have said something. Wondered if he wanted to talk. But ultimately I decided that silence was its own kind of answer. We'd said everything that needed saying, through lawyers and court documents and that final text message. Anything else would just be rehashing old wounds. Some relationships don't get neat endings, they just end. And learning to be okay with that was part of the healing. The money I had donated to the legal aid nonprofit ended up funding 3 debt recovery cases for people who couldn't afford lawyers. All 3 won. One of them, a single mother who'd loaned her brother $20,000 for medical bills he never paid back, reached out to thank me. She said the donation had changed her life. Not just because she got her money back, but because it proved the system could work for people like her. I met her for coffee, heard her story, added her to the list of people I stayed in touch with. The network was growing. People helping people. Proof that kindness could be strategic, purposeful, world-changing in small, significant ways. 3 years after serving Logan with that court order, I stood in my new apartment, boxes half unpacked, sunlight streaming through windows that actually opened all the way. I'd moved out of the cramped one-bedroom with the leaky faucet and fighting neighbors. This place was bigger, brighter, mine in a way the old apartment never was. I'd furnished it carefully. A couch that didn't sag, a kitchen table that didn't wobble, bookshelves lined with titles about boundaries, trauma, financial recovery, a framed photo on the wall, not of family, but of the support group from Grace's final session before she retired. All of us smiling, arms around each other, proof that family could be chosen. My phone buzzed. A text from Matthew. "Dinner tonight? Got someone I want you to meet." I smiled. Matthew had been dropping hints about setting me up with a friend of his for weeks. I'd been avoiding it, not because I wasn't ready, but because dating felt like stepping into a whole new kind of vulnerability. But maybe that was the point. Maybe after spending years protecting myself, it was time to let someone in again, someone who'd earned it, someone who showed up. I replied, "Sure, where and when?" As I set the phone down, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. Same face, same eyes. But something fundamental had changed. The person staring back at me wasn't the one who'd wired $50,000 out of guilt and hope. Wasn't the one who'd waited by the phone for calls that never came. Wasn't the one who'd believed that love meant accepting mistreatment. This person had boundaries. Had learned that walking away from toxicity wasn't abandonment, it was self-preservation. Had discovered that the people worth keeping were the ones who stayed without being begged. I thought about younger me, standing in that kitchen 3 years ago, cursor hovering over the transfer button, wanting so badly to believe in family and second chances, in the goodness of people who shared your blood. I wished I could go back and tell that version of myself what was coming, the betrayal, the court case, the isolation, but also the growth, the community, the purpose, the freedom that comes from finally, fully, choosing yourself. But I couldn't go back, none of us can. We can only move forward, carrying the lessons, leaving the weight. So that's what I did. I finished unpacking. Hung the last picture. Stood in my living room, in my space, in my life, and felt something I hadn't felt in longer than I could remember. Not happiness exactly. Something steadier, something that didn't depend on other people's validation or approval. Peace. Real, hard-won, unshakable peace. The kind that comes from knowing that when the world asked me to choose between being liked and being respected, between keeping the peace and keeping my dignity, between family loyalty and self-loyalty, I chose myself. And I do it again. Every single time. That evening I met Matthew and his friend at a small Italian restaurant on the west side of town. Her name was Zoe Lewis, a social worker with kind eyes and a firm handshake. We talked for 3 hours. About work, about life, about the messy, complicated business of setting boundaries with people you love. She told me about her own family struggles. I shared pieces of mine. Not the whole story, not yet, but enough. And when the night ended, when we stood outside the restaurant saying goodbye, she looked at me and said, "I'd like to do this again." I smiled. Me too. Walking to my car, I realized something. For years, I'd been fighting to get back what was taken from me. The money, sure, but also the trust, the belief that people were fundamentally good, the hope that family meant something. And I had gotten some of it back. Not from Logan, not from the court, but from people like Matthew, Hannah, Grace, the support group, and now maybe Zoe. From myself. I'd reclaimed my voice, my worth, my refusal to accept anything less than what I deserved. The fight wasn't about the $50,000. It never really was. It was about proving to myself that I mattered, that my pain was valid, that demanding accountability wasn't selfish or petty or wrong. It was necessary. And anyone who couldn't understand that didn't deserve a place in my life. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove home through streets that felt different now, not because the city had changed, but because I had. I was no longer the person who waited for permission to stand up for himself. No longer the person who believed that being the bigger person meant making myself smaller. I was someone who knew his worth, who protected his peace, who understood that the best revenge wasn't making someone pay. It was building a life so full of purpose and joy and genuine connection that their absence didn't leave a hole. It just left space for better things. And as I pulled into my parking spot, turned off the car, and looked up at the windows of my apartment glowing warm against the evening sky, I realized I'd done exactly that. I'd built something better, not perfect, not pain-free, but mine. Fully, completely, unapologetically mine. And that was worth more than any court judgment, more than any apology I'd never receive, more than any relationship I'd had to walk away from to protect myself. Some battles you fight to win, others you fight to prove you were worth fighting for in the first place. This one had been both. And standing there, keys in hand, heart steady, future unwritten but no longer dictated by the past, I knew one thing for certain. I'd do it all again. Because the person I'd become in the fighting was someone I was proud to be. Someone who knew that love without respect was just pretty words. That family without accountability was just shared DNA. That forgiveness without change was just permission to be hurt again. I walked inside, locked the door behind me, and finally, after 3 long years of war, let myself rest. Not because the story was over, but because I'd learned the most important lesson of all. You can't control what people take from you, but you can control what you refuse to lose. And I'd refused to lose myself. That, more than anything else, was the real victory. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.